Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to The World of Words Goes Digital. He Kōrero Matihiko o te ao. World of Words Goes Digital celebrates Aotearoa's authors, comedians, musicians and poets who share words of wisdom, inspiration, personal challenges and journeys, culminating in a series of rich and diverse conversations.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Suzette Goldsmith. It's my privilege to welcome you to WOMAD New Zealand's World of Words online series, which is supported by Creative New Zealand. It's also my very great pleasure to be introducing award-winning writer Chessie Henry. Chessie holds a Masters of Creative Writing from Victoria University in Wellington. And last year, her first book, a memoir called We Can Make a Life, won the E.H. McCormack Prize for General Non-Fiction at the prestigious Ockham Book Awards. Kia ora, Chessie, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great to be here again. WOMAD round 2.
Let's begin with We Can Make a Life, which is a marvellous, rich and joyful account of your own family and the challenges that you've all faced together. I've seen your book described as a memoir about the devastating Christchurch earthquakes, and they, of course, play a major part in your book, but there's much, much more in your book. And because some of your viewers perhaps are not familiar with your book, perhaps you could describe what it is, what it's about for us.
Yeah, sure. I think really the best way to describe it is probably as a sort of family memoir. It's kind of tells the story. It starts in the 1960, the year my parents were both born. They're born on the same day, and it kind of from there sort of tracks their history, I guess, their lives and meeting each other. And then there's another parallel story, which is me in the present day writing. So there's sort of these two stories going along, and then eventually they meet up, and it sort of then turns into, I guess, what was a really big sort of moment in our lives, which was the Kaikoura earthquake, and then a bit of the Christchurch earthquake as well. So it's sort of a bit of a rolling family story, I guess, if that can remotely summarise it.
So what do you see as its main concerns?
I think I suppose when I try to describe it, it's really just about life and kind of family and how we kind of roll our way through things and through tragedy and through grief, and how we have our own kind of experiences of that. And this is very much my experience of my family history. So it's not even the true version necessarily. It's sort of as I saw it. But I do try to bring their voices into it and kind of, I suppose it's just I think people say, oh, so much has happened but in your life or in your family's life. But I really think if anybody wrote down their family stories, a lot of them are like that. A lot of them, we have those kind of shared grief and shared kind of wins and losses, and yeah, it's a bit about that.
So what was it that prompted you to actually write the book?
Well, at the time, I think I just finished my Masters at Victoria University and in creative writing, and so I was feeling kind of very motivated, I guess, at that moment to really pursue writing. And we just had the Kaikoura earthquake. We'd kind of been displaced from our home, and my father, who's a rural GP in Kaikoura, I was sort of watching him really kind of struggle with his own, he was just having a really hard time, and I was kind of a bit confronted by what I suppose rural GPs and a lot of GPs kind of face in terms of the huge emotional impact of their work. And so it sort of felt like everything had just really come to a head, I suppose. And as someone who was interested in writing already, I guess it sort of felt like a bit of a perfect storm of things. And so I just felt really compelled and it felt quite urgent actually at the time to really just to write some of what we were experiencing down, especially given that it was so raw and in the moment. And I think I kind of could sense even then that there'd be a power in writing that down, because now when I read it, it feels, like such a window in time, and it feels completely different to how we feel now with a bit of perspective. So it's funny. Yeah.
Can I just pick you up on that, or pick up on what you were saying about your father and being a rural GP? There's quite a section in the book about this where you interview your father, and I'm interested. I actually know the answer, but I'm very interested in how you actually got him to talk, how you gathered the information that you needed.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think much of this book was just kind of came out of conversations that I had with family members as I was kind of trawling back through our sort of past history, trying to work out a version of events, I guess. And in that particular, I think the moment that you're speaking about, where I interviewed Dad about his experience, not of the Kaikoura earthquake, but actually of the Christchurch earthquake, which had happened 6 years earlier. And he had happened to be in Christchurch that day and ended up being part of the rescue efforts there. And I sort of knew that it was that it had been a big day, but we hadn't really talked about it much. I think it just sort of got a bit swept under the rug. And beyond, we didn't want to sort of press him on it. But then it felt like enough time passed, and I'd asked him about it. And we were driving to Christchurch in the car from Kaikoura, so 2.5 hour drive. And I just pressed record on my phone and kind of started asking him questions. And yeah, what came out was this really just extremely harrowing story. But something about being in the car, I think, when you just don't have to look at each other and you're just sort of able to, sort of talk. It was quite an amazing experience. We were both very emotional at the end of it 2 hours later.
I can imagine. It's an interesting idea that you've actually captured him, haven't you? He's in the car.
Yeah.
He can't get away. Yeah. He's got to answer questions.
And I said to him at the time, I was sort of like, just really try and think of it in a sensory way and try and remember the details. And it's not, I suppose, not very often that you might really tell a story like that. And I felt really guilty afterwards because it really brought up a lot of really unresolved grief. And I felt really responsible for triggering it, actually. But I do believe that I think it would have come out eventually because, it was definitely bubbling away there.
Have you talked to him about that? That the fact that did come up?
Yeah, well, it really had a very swift, immediate impact on all our lives, really. Like that really was a week later was the moment that he then wrote. He was, up at 5 a.m. And later we realised dealing with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt and really, really struggling. And a week after I interviewed him, he wrote a letter kind of to express his burnout, the sort of the real complete stress that he was under. He just wrote a letter to himself to sort of express that, and that really kicked into motion a whole lot of other events that were sort of him coming to terms with the fact that he was really, really, really struggling. And I think had I not perhaps interviewed him, that might not have happened, but maybe not then. But we've talked about it a lot since, and I think ultimately, and that's something that I sort of explore in the book, I guess, I think ultimately it was really important that we talked and had that conversation, and then it did come out and that he wrote the letter. And it was a strange writing process because obviously I was sort of, as I was going, things were happening, and it just sort of ended up being this very intense book about just people kind of muddling their way through the complexities of life, really. So
you've described the challenges of writing a memoir in your book, actually as part of the writing. Can you elaborate on this for us?
Yeah, sort of, I think what I alluded to a little bit before, just about that there's no one version of events, really, that is the true version or the right version. And it's, especially with our kind of messy emotional lives and all of us kind of having our own experiences of that, is very hard to try and, kind of work out what is really the real story. And so I'm pretty upfront about that in the book, about talking, about how it can't really possibly be true. It's definitely the way I saw it. And I felt very, aware of protecting my family in it as well, and protecting their, I don't know, not wanting to write something on them for them. So, it was a funny experience, really. But I think that it actually helped me kind of just acknowledging it in the book and saying, this is weird. I don't, I'm in it. I say I'm nervous, or I'm, sort of struggling with the process and feeling, who am I to write this story, and does the story matter, and kind of having to acknowledge your own privilege within that, and is my grief as valid as this other grief, and kind of muddling through all of that process was definitely a part of it.
It's a nice touch because you bring your reader along with you. We kind of struggle along with you,
Yeah. And I think I was really nervous at the time. I don't know now. Now I look back on some of it, and I think I wish I'd been a little bit more confident, perhaps. Or I don't know. It was a very first book, and I had no idea if it'd be published. And I think, it was like 4 years ago now, I think, that I was writing it. So it's a funny kind of experience looking back on it all.
How did the rest of your family react to the book?
They were actually, I'm very, very lucky, really. They've been sort of so ongoingly supportive of my writing career, and I think both my parents understood that that I had this need to write, and that they could also see the value in I guess telling some of those stories, especially around the earthquakes, and kind of actually putting a really personal lens on that, because everybody gets so saturated with earthquake stories, I think, and even now I don't know if I would pick up an earthquake book, but still all of these people had this experience, and lots of people lost family members or friends, or they lost homes or possessions, or just felt displaced for a long period of time. And so I think my parents really understood the value in kind of writing that down, and luckily no one in the family vetoed anything, but there was a lot of trust throughout the process. I think I shared a lot with them, and we had a existing relationship that allowed me to do that in a way that they felt safe throughout the process, if that makes sense.
Did everybody in your family get to read the book before it was sent off to a publisher?
Yeah, I didn't give it to them sort of right till the very end, because I wasn't sure what would stay and what would change. But in the end, I sort of sheepishly passed it over to them, sort of apologetically. But so all my brothers read it, and I think they were quite surprised that I'd actually done it. But everyone was really good about it, and just really, I think, really proud, which was really nice. Yeah.
I remember you told me earlier that when you sent it off to a publisher, it didn't have an ending.
No, it didn't have an ending. It was very much a sort of messy draft, really. I think I just got to the point where I was feeling so confused. I think I just needed some input from someone else, because I've been with it for so long by myself, and had kind of just got to a point where I was like, I don't even know if this is going to be published, or if I've gone way off track, or I don't know. So I was a bit lost with it, but poor Victoria University Press had to suffer through that one, and then they were actually amazing, and just kind of giving me a bit of confidence in it, really, and saying this is it's definitely it's good, which was actually just probably what I really needed from someone else. And they really helped me kind of shape the ending, I guess, by kind of acknowledging that there was no ending. There was never going to be a nice wrapped up moment, because we were kind of still right in the mix. So
it's pretty amazing. First book, young writer, unknown, basically sends it to publisher. Publisher says, yes, this is great.
I know.
You must have been so excited.
I was. I honestly, I felt like I can remember walking up to VUP, their kind of offices, because they'd asked me up for a meeting, having sent it off, and it was such a surreal experience, and such a dream, without sounding really cheesy. It was something that it was crazy. I was very happy at that point.
So that was your first book, and now you're on to your second, which is notoriously difficult, I believe, after a really successful first one. I don't want to burst your bubble, but here we go.
I know.
Sorry.
Oh no, I think I quite agree with you. I think it's I'm already feeling quite quite nervous. But yeah, it's funny. I'm on so I like WOMAD for this series. I also received some money from a grant from Creative New Zealand to kind of go forth with the next one, and it's also a shift from non-fiction into fiction, so doubly nerve-wracking. But yeah, hoping it will be good.
That's a great confidence boost from Creative New Zealand to support you.
It was, yeah. It's a pretty pretty amazing, and they've done such a incredible job, I feel, of kind of really rallying for artists after this whole nightmare pandemic that we've all just been through. But yeah, so it's a real amazing vote of confidence, really. And I think the stakes are a little bit lower because this is actually I'm returning to work on the novel that I wrote during my master's year, so 2016, and so it is already, I have a whole draft complete now, but I think at this point I'm gonna just start again with the same idea, because I think I've grown up a lot. It's been a long time, and I think the writing, when I look back on it, I think I can just do better. So I thought rather than try blend old with new, I'm going to just start again with the same concept. So at least I have a bit of a shape of it, which I think is a good place.
What is the concept? Just without revealing too much.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually wrote this whole thing before the Kōrero earthquake, which is kind of funny because in a way it's sort of similar in theme. So it's set in a future Wellington post a sort of really significant flood that's kind of left this sort of community trying to rebuild and trying to kind of make sense of this sort of new world that they're in, and it's about a mother and a daughter, and the mother is experiencing some kind of early onset dementia and kind of losing her sense of self and identity, and so the two of them decide to walk the Te Aroa track from Wellington to Ohau, and so it's kind of about this journey they go on together, and disclaimer, this might all change because I've got to revisit it and see if it's still working, but currently that's the kind of that's the rough overview.
Interesting that you started it before the earthquakes, and of course now that we're emerging from lockdown, the pandemic, we're much more, I believe, conscious of nature and our human relationship with nature. And I know you've mentioned that you are interested in exploring that issue in the second book. Can you explain a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think having had that experience, and it's funny because I'm obviously was interested in it even before the earthquake happened, but even more so now, that feeling of the ground underneath you turning on you, and in a sense, or these kind of natural disasters that happen, even the fires in Australia, or the pandemic, you suddenly feel like, nothing is certain or sacred, and everything's a bit up for grabs. And I suppose that's something that I'm really interested in. And I think also climate change and we have we're facing these big kind of massive issues, to do with the environment and the natural world. And I guess I'm just interested in how we navigate that, and how that affects people differently, and how I suppose, is it helpful to be positive, or is it actually kind of really unhelpful to try and be positive? And it's just this funny kind of there's a lot in there, I think, and I haven't quite figured out what it is specifically that I'm interested in, but I'm just interested in exploring it, I suppose.
We Can Make It Life was it dealt with the topic of loss too, loss of people, loss of home, loss of place. Is that something that's coming out in this novel?
Well, I think it is, and it was, when I wrote it last, a lot of it was that feeling of, this place that has so much meaning, or this place that you've kind of shaped your whole identity around, where you've kind of come from, and then if that is taken away from you or dramatically changed or lost, then, and it's the same for people, people that you sort of relate to so deeply, and if they're changing, or how do we react to that? And I think, on the one hand, these things can be so significant and so devastating, but on the other hand, it's incredible how quickly humans just adapt, even like in the last month, or the whole sort of pandemic, just shows you that something that seems so absolutely unfathomable only a week beforehand. We were at WOMAD together, and it was sort of just starting, but it wasn't, I don't think we could ever have appreciated the scale of what was to come. But then you sort of find yourself 2 weeks later having adapted to this whole new life. And I think that's the same with us now. We lost our home, and at the time that seemed unfathomable. Again, you just feel like, oh, how will we ever sort of be without this place that meant so much to us? But then quite quickly you just sort of survive and adapt, and I think that's really interesting to me.
You mentioned the topic of home, and it was a very important part of We Can Make a Life, and you didn't really describe that when you gave us a little synopsis of what it was about. Can you elaborate on that for us? Just explain how you lost your home and what the effect of that was.
Yeah, sure. So our family home was in Clarence Valley, which is sort of just north of Kaikoura, and that was essentially the epicenter of the earthquake that happened in sort of November 2016. And so we were that was, I think, my mum and my brother and my cousin, who happened to be up there at the time, were there for 3 days, and then helicoptered out, and that was really the last time that we have lived there. And since then, we've been back to get our things, but basically had to sort of abandon this place that had a lot of sort of family significance for us. And so it was an interesting process writing about it and kind of unpacking it, I guess, and then while also trying to move on and kind of make sense of your new life. But yeah, that is something that I find really interesting, how much those places sort of how you belong to them, and then how also you can sort of just be without them really quickly again. It's just a sort of strange experience. But
that topic of losing a home in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's pretty unusual. It's something that we read about on the news. There's an enormous flood, or there's a volcano or earthquake or something or other, but to lose it in New Zealand is enormous. Where's home now for you all?
So we're still in Kaikoura, and I think, my parents have actually, we've got some new land, so this time the Puipui Valley, so sort of similarly isolated and remote, but really beautiful. And so they're actually kind of they sort of got it with it had a sort of little cabin on it, but not really a house, but they're renovating it at the moment. So I'm actually I'm visiting them at the moment. I'm here in Kaikoura, and we're in they're in a rental house for the moment. So it feels like it's been a long time really of not having that real base, but we're getting there. And I think 3 months time moving into a sort of new version of this new spot for us. So new chapter.
And that will be home for you, or are you in Wellington?
I live in Littleton in Christchurch. Yeah, so I'm still down there, and I'm just this is day 2 of my new life as a full-time writer with my grant from Creative New Zealand. So I actually finished work on Friday, and so I'm just visiting mum and dad at the moment, so kind of catching up with them, which is cool.
So with this new life, this new writing life, full-time for a while, how does it work out? Are you a writer that sits in bed and taps away on your laptop, or do you get up and dress and sit in the office? How are you going?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a mix really. I think I have to confess that I did write a lot of We Can Make a Life like in bed, in a state of disarray. And the lockdown again proved to me that when left at home, I really I'm not one of those people that get up and get dressed. Sadly, I wish I was. But so I think I'm a bit of a homebody, and I'm a morning person. So usually I just get up and kind of write in the mornings, and kind of muddle my way my way through it. But the same, We Can Make a Life, I wrote in quite a short, concentrated burst, and I think I think this will be much the same, kind of trying to squeeze it all into a short amount of time. But yeah, just kind of crack into it. I think I need the time and space that seems to work a lot better for me than trying to do it around a full-time job as well. So I'm feeling supremely grateful now to Creative New Zealand.
What was your experience of being locked down, and where were you?
I was in Littleton at home, and I was, it was a funny time for me because our work, we were kind of in full swing, didn't stop at all, just kind of plowed ahead with the work we were doing. We do some work with the Arts Foundation and various clients that really, it was time for them to kind of step up rather than slow down. So we were, just into it the whole way, spending a lot of time on Zoom, and so I didn't have the same experience as some, which I guess was a really reflective time. But yeah, I mean, I actually, again, sort of, I think I found it okay. I found it hard. I found it really hard at times, and I think especially in the beginning when it was all so uncertain, I did, found that really difficult actually. But as it went on, and I think, we were so lucky that it became clear that it was winding down, and it made everything a bit easier. And I was very lucky to be in Littleton. I think by the sea and hills makes a big difference.
And
much writing was done, creative writing.
So would you say that COVID-19's influenced your writing at all, with that period?
I think what I tried to do during COVID was just to be observant, because in my head I sort of thought this is, it is such an interesting time, and I think we'll probably it's sort of still unfolding, isn't it? Like how it's all going to play out and how it will impact us and how it's changed things. It's kind of still unfolding. But yeah, I did just try to be observant and to myself and to kind of other people, I guess, to see like how everyone was kind of coping and reacting, because I think it's another example of just that weird human ability we have to kind of adjust and adapt so quickly. But yeah, it was a strange sort of surreal time. I think I'm still sort of making sense of it in my head.
You referred earlier to the fact that earlier in the year we were sitting on a stage at WOMAD in the sunshine, and you were having a chat about your book, and you were fielding questions from an audience, a real live audience, and now we're talking via Zoom through a screen. Hello. I know. And we now face a lot of travel constraints, not just through the pandemic, but also through climate change. And I wonder whether you think these online events like this one, WOMAD New Zealand's, online series, World of Words, will it become frequent or even perhaps permanent feature of writing?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it was such a strange time in the sense that we were so distant, but also realised how hugely connected we still are. I mean, I felt like it was almost a bit draining how much communication that happened over COVID. But I think it's funny, and then in a way, and then you start to really crave that audience, that real life connection, like coming up and people talking to me afterwards, and it's such a different thing. I don't know what the future will hold with all of this, but I think it's pretty, so many arts organisations and artists had to just be so ready to pivot, the dreaded COVID word, but everybody was really forced to do that to continue working. And I think it shows that we can't, here we are doing a WOMAD session from our respective homes, and I guess there's a lot of that's exciting to think that we all can do that so kind of swiftly. And so I think that will be really interesting to see what happens with festivals and maybe the kind of future connections that can come internationally that we might not have otherwise. Maybe meeting writers and having writers visit from different places that otherwise might not have made the trip in real life. It seems kind of exciting. But I guess, it still seems very watch this space to me. Not sure.
What's the advantage to you, having experienced it, of a live audience?
I think the live audience, I don't know, I think it's just so much more, you all feel so much more present. I don't know, I think because we're on a screen so much, you get used to that kind of multitasking, and I don't know, like if I was just watching this, I'd be on my phone as well and kind of maybe listening to music, and it's all just kind of sensory overload. Whereas I think that kind of just like human manners of actually sitting and watching someone when they're talking and kind of feeling like you really are there. And yeah, I've had some really cool experiences. You know, like after WOMAD, met people who came to wander up and say hello, and I think that's, yeah, you can't really replace that sort of intimacy. Yeah.
I've interviewed some older, let's say, or more experienced writers, senior writers, and they've spent a lot of their career travelling to residencies, to festivals. It's how they've made their name, how they've sold their books. And in the short term anyway, you as a younger and emerging, I guess, writer, you may not have that privilege. How do you feel about that? How have you thought about it?
Yeah, it is a scary thought. And I think, like, you know, I was really lucky, went to Hong Kong Literary Festival last year, and that was like such an example of why that experience is so valuable, you know, because you end up sitting in this random little hotel with all these other writers that have come from around the world, and, you know, you have the kind of the session or whatever, which is one thing, but then there's the drinking of wine in the hotel room, you know, down in the little bar, just like sitting in Hong Kong like late at night, and it was such a you know, I came back feeling so inspired from that, and just feeling really, it was such a cool experience. And I know that eventually you get really burnt out by going around and doing festivals and stuff, but for me, I'm still absolutely soaking them up, and just like those, same with WOMAD, like the best part was really the artist bus in and out, you know, and kind of like sitting there and just talking to different creatives and artists and musicians. And I mean, that was kind of the highlight. So it's really gutting to think that might be off the cards. But I think, you know, it reminds, you know, it's like festivals here. It's like we've got a lot of amazing talent here, and maybe we'll just have to kind of, you know, really focus on that and focus on those interactions that we can have with our fellow New Zealanders. So yeah, but you're quite right. It's definitely a bit of a blow.
This year we've seen the demise of the 27-year-old New Zealand Review of Books, which was dedicated to reviewing books. And the Bauer stable of magazines has closed, which also was a steady resource of book reviews. And more recently, newspaper book review columns seem to be disappearing. And how important are book reviews to you as a writer?
I think book reviews are so important. And it's that it's sort of not just the reviews themselves, but those writers, you know, who are kind of interested in books and reading, and are writers themselves, and you know, all these amazing journalists that kind of take the time to really think about books and reading and kind of sharing their thoughts and like that. I read book reviews all the time, and you know, I don't know if you're supposed to read your own. I do. I like kind of read them all. But yeah, I mean, I think I found that so shocking when that all happened, and just the speed at which it happened. And I had an internship with North and South magazine back in the day, and they've always been very kind of supportive of my writing, and I think those, just all those kind of amazing, they're like cultural institutions, you know, so it was so devastating to see that happen.
Yeah, and they're not just that either, they're the promoter of your book. If we don't read a review, we don't know the book's there, unless we're in a bookshop, if we're allowed to go to a bookshop at the time. But it's a huge effect on New Zealand, I think. Hopefully some of them will come back.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that whole thing of just hopefully have to come out in other ways, and maybe it will be all on, you know, just online, but it's a very complicated landscape for them all, and it
is indeed. One of the big advantages, of course, of having a live audience and being at WOMAD or a book festival is the reading by the writer. And I wonder if you would please particularly because, people are not exactly familiar with your book, some of these people that are watching this. Could you do a reading for us, please?
I would love to. And I've just chosen a little short reading, and it's from a chapter called After, which I think feels a little bit appropriate for sort of where we all are right now, and trying to make sense of after.
This is from We Can Make a Life, is it?
This is from We Can Make a Life, yeah. And it's just a short little bit. And it actually says that, I say in it that Christchurch doesn't feel like my place anymore, which it didn't at the time because I was living in Wellington and I'd sort of moved on from Christchurch, which is where I went to school. But now I'm back in Christchurch, and so disclaimer, it does feel like my place again, which is exactly what I'm talking about. You just change and change. But yeah, I'll read this for you now.
Okay, thank you.
After. Christchurch was the backdrop to my childhood and then to my teenage years at boarding school. Afternoons spent catching the bus to Northlands Mall for rice balls and window shopping at Glasson's, our white shirts sticking to our underarms as we swayed along in the after-school mob. When we were old enough to go out in the weekends, we'd head into Sol Square with our fake IDs, bright-eyed from the RTDs we sculled in the botanical gardens. We would order lattes from Coffee Culture, drive to Wanaka or Mai Tai for New Year's, and spend our weekends trawling through the musty racks of Toffs, the second-hand clothing warehouse. In my last year of boarding school, we would drag our duvets onto the lawn and lie around in our pyjamas on the grass, eating grapes and crackers and talking for hours, everything ending and beginning at the same time. Christchurch doesn't feel like my place anymore. So many of the places I knew back then have changed, been lost and then rebuilt in a different way. But I still carry Christchurch around with me. It never feels defeated. The city only seems to rise and rise. Sprawling murals painted on the sides of red-stickered, half-destroyed buildings. New cafes appearing in abandoned car parks. This is awesome, my friend from Wellington said, when we visited Christchurch one weekend, walking through the new high street. A whole community pushing their way through the cracks like wildflowers. Once, in City Gallery, Wellington, I stumbled across an exhibition by the artist Julia Morrison called Meet Me on the Other Side. It felt strange at first, eerie objects and structures salvaged and reformed, taken out of context and made new. In some of the works, grey blobs, now dried and hardened, had oozed through wire or empty spaces, dripping over edges and pooling in lumpy masses. Monochromatic paintings hung on the walls, vast and textured, made from spilled liquor and silt, replicating Morrison's alcohol cabinet, which had smashed in the Christchurch earthquake. Her studio had been in the red zone, and this series of sculptures found their roots in damaged objects, things abandoned and picked up again, transformed. Familiar items like plastic bags melded with silt from liquefaction had been suspended in cement and resin. The blobs were solid, but somehow still in motion. "What is this?" a little kid beside me asked. His dad replied, "I'm not really sure." I think that's how we all felt afterwards.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. I can hear the audience clapping.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm sure they're out there.
Even though they're not here. Chessie, tell me about the name of We Can Make a Life. Where did that come from?
We Can Make a Life actually comes from Fly My Pretty's song. Fly My Pretty's the band, New Zealand band. And the song's called We Can Make a Life. And actually my little brother Rufus, who has Down syndrome, who's very much his own real character in the book, it's a song that's kind of really sort of significant for him. He just loves it. And at his 21st, we all, my other brothers and I, I've got 4 brothers, and so the 4 of us stood up and kind of sang it to Rufus with him up there with us. And it was just this really, I think, significant moment for us because his life has been full of, just complications and he's, been very, I guess, challenged by his own disability and his kind of, the challenges he's had to face in his life. And I think it was such a moment of like, look, you just make a life. And it seems so emblematic of kind of what we'd all been through. It felt like a kind of good emotional note for the book. So it was really a selfish choice because it just means a lot to me. But it makes sense.
That's lovely. Just one other question, and it's going back a bit. you're talking about your funding from Creative New Zealand, and also I noted that you had support for We Can Make a Life. It wasn't from an official funder, but it was another form. Can you explain what that was?
Yeah, so while I was doing my master's, we had this awesome woman called Kate from Boosted come and talk to us about Boosted, which is a crowdfunding platform run through the Arts Foundation, and it's kind of specifically for arts projects, and it's a way for you to kind of create a community around your own project. So you have to kind of pitch the project to Boosted, and if they kind of accept it, then you sort of have a month to reach a certain target, and then it's really about kind of asking your friends and family to sort of chip in and support your project. The kind of idea being that, you know, art needs money to happen, but a lot of artists don't have that much money, and so it's a way to kind of support artists to get their work off the ground. And I was very hesitant. It had always been a little bit like, I wouldn't want to ask for money, feel uncomfortable about it. But just kind of once I got to know the platform and kind of understand it, it was seemed like an awesome idea, and it really did. It was a really incredible process for me, and I feel like actually, I did get this whole sort of wave of support from friends and family who knew that I wanted to do this project, and I think, don't want to speak for them, but I kind of the sense I've got anyway is that it's been a really cool experience for them, kind of donating $10 at the start and then sort of watching it turn into a real thing. And I tried to update people throughout the process, so kind of being like, I've started, I'm here, I've done this many words, and then I've sent it to a publisher, fingers crossed. And so I think people felt like they were kind of on the roller coaster with me, but couldn't have done it without Boosted. So it meant that I could just go down to part-time hours and just work nearly full-time on the book. So it's really cool.
They must have been thrilled that they won an award along with you.
I know. I think it was really cool for people, and I think I think that actually people really want to support artists and creativity, and I have lots of friends that are like, oh god, that's my worst nightmare, but I'm so happy that someone's doing it, and I think I've donated to Boosted projects since then. It's just a way, kind of a give and get back kind of thing. It's really cool.
Chessie, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's been really nice. It's lovely to see you at the end of this or behind the screen. So thank you so much, and also all the best for the next venture, and we will wait to see what comes of it.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you too. But
also I want to thank you, the audience. We can't see you. Chessie and I are looking at each other. We don't know where you are, but we know you're there or will be there, and we do appreciate your company. Also need to thank WOMAD New Zealand for setting up this series, World of Words, because it's another chance for us to talk and tell you all about the book. And also Creative New Zealand, who've instigated this, not instigated, but have supported World of Words, the online series. So thank you all. Awesome. And all that's need to say is ka kite anō and goodbye.
See you soon. Bye.
These conversations are proudly presented by WOMAD New Zealand with the support of Creative New Zealand.
And it all happened right here, in the sprawling, brawling gold towns of New Zealand's wild frontier. Kia!